Hey, what's up everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a really quick video for Spider-Man No Way Home. This is a spoiler talk video, so spoilers will happen in 3, 2, 1. You have been warned. Okay, so Spider-Man No Way Home, of course we already know what the plot is, how, you know, the whole world knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, like he goes to Doctor Strange and asks Doctor Strange if he can, you know, cast a spell to make everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but you know, spell goes wrong, and you know, because of that, you know, they get visitors from other worlds, which are actually past Spider-Man villains from other Spider-Man franchises that we've had before in the past. And yeah, so we already know that he has to, you know, capture all the villains and all that in order to send them back to the universes. So this is what actually happens, and I'm gonna just jump straight ahead. But then, another thing is that I want to talk about before I really get into this is that, like, a big cameo is in this movie, and this is actually before he goes, you know, when Peter does the whole spell thing with Doctor Strange. You know, since, you know, the public eye see him as a menace and all that, you know, Peter Parker needs a lawyer, you know, in order to prove that he's innocent and all that. So he actually gets a lawyer, and the lawyer is actually Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, and it's not just any other Daredevil, like just a random Daredevil. It's actually the Daredevil from the Daredevil Netflix series, which is a huge deal. So that clearly indicates that Daredevil is part of the MCU, and not only is he part of the MCU, but the whole Netflix, TV show, superhero group, the Defenders, they're basically part of the MCU as well, because, you know, they were on Netflix. And they have their own Netflix TV shows and all that. So Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and you know, Iron Fist, like they're all in the MCU basically. And we already saw how in Hawkeye, you know, Kingpin is also in the MCU, and it's the Kingpin from the Netflix Daredevil show. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. But anyways, you know, Peter Parker, you know, after the whole spell goes wrong, you know, he has to capture all the villains, and he actually manages to do that. And Doctor Strange is like, all right, it's time to send them home. But then there's only a thing though, and Peter didn't know about this, and the villains were talking about this and all that. And it was actually Sandman who was actually explaining all this. He said that Green Goblin and Doc Ock, they both died, and Green Goblin and Doc Ock, they didn't even know they died, because like I said, they have no memory of that. Like they didn't know that they died. So after, you know, Sandman tells them that, Electro, Jamie Foxx, his character even goes like, you know, I was beating up Spider-Man and all that, and then like he was like, and then he's like, oh snap, I can't even remember what happened. He said I was about to die. So like they were all like coming to their senses, like, wait a minute, like, we don't want to go back. And Peter is kind of with them, because he's like, hey, I don't want to send them back, because it was really Aunt May who convinced Peter Parker, like Tom Holland's Peter Parker. He was like, where she told him that you know, everyone deserves a second chance, they don't deserve to die. And she basically convinces him, like, hey, like, maybe we shouldn't send these people back just yet. So, but Doctor Strange, you know, he disagrees with Peter and all that. He's like, you know what, no, they had to go back, it's their fate. Like, they have to go back to universes. And he's like, if they die, they die. But Peter Parker's like, nope. And he takes the box that sends them back to the universe. He takes that away from Doctor Strange, and the whole chase scene happens. Whole fight scene happens. They end up going to the mirror dimension. But the only thing is that Spider-Man, he's actually able to outsmart Doctor Strange, and he's actually able to trap him in the mirror dimension. And he even steals Doctor Strange's ring that he uses to open up the portals, which that actually comes in like very good use later on in this movie, and I will get to that. But what happens is that, you know, Aunt May, Peter Parker, they take all the villains, and he even explains to everybody. He's like, hey, I think I can fix you guys. He's like, maybe I can send you all back with the second chance, so that way you guys won't end up dying. And they're like, okay, fine, like, we're with that. So they end up going to Happy's place, and that's where Peter Parker ends up making, like, he tries to make cures for everybody. He tries to help all of them, like, you know, go back to normal, you know, like go back to like their old selves. He even helps Doc Ock. He actually manages to do that. And yeah, because remember Doc Ock in this movie, he, like I said, once again, he, like I said, the arms control of him, because that's what makes Doc Ock evil, is that the arms are actually able to take control of him instead of him controlling the arms. So yeah, so Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, he's actually able to help Doc Ock. He makes a new piece of technology that'll help Doc Ock's neural link, and Doc Ock basically turns good, because we already knew that Doc Ock was not a bad guy, though. It's like, we knew that from the second Spider-Man movie, from the Tobey Maguire franchise. Like, we saw how, like, in that trilogy, how Doc Ock was not a bad person. It's just a science experiment just gone wrong. And when the experiment went haywire and all that, he lost complete control of the arms and all that. So it's cool to see that Tom Holland's Peter Parker was actually able to, fix that, fix that situation and all that with, Doc Ock. So now Doc Ock is in complete control of the arms like he's supposed to. And, he turns good. And in the Spider-Man 2 movie, you saw at the end of that movie how he even said, at the end of the movie, right before he died, he said, "I will not die a monster." And, he was a good guy, and he saved New York at the end of that movie in Spider-Man 2. So just see him be a good guy again, like he's supposed to be, it gives you a really good feeling. So yeah, he's actually able to help Doc Ock, and then he tries to help Electro, he tries to help Sandman, and then Green Goblin. But unfortunately, after he helps Doc Ock, Green Goblin, here's the crazy thing that happened. So Tom Holland's spider sense goes off in this movie. Like, at that moment, like when they're in the apartment and he's still working on the experiments to help everyone, his spider sense starts to go off. And Norman Osborn and Doc Ock, like Dr. Octavius, they're asking Peter to, like, hey, like, what's wrong? And then Peter's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So he's really trying to figure out, like, what's going on. He's trying to locate where the danger's at. And even Jamie Foxx's Electro, from Amazing Spider-Man 2, he's like, why are you looking at me like that? And then Sandman from, Spider-Man 3, he's like, wait, what's wrong? And he finally figured out what the problem was, and it was Norman Osborn. So he web shoots Norman Osborn's hand, and Norman Osborn, instead of him being Norman Osborn, he completely switches over to the Green Goblin. Like, immediately, like, he changes his voice and all that. Like, he goes, like, back into the other persona. I'm like, dang. So, like I said, because even though, yeah, Norman Osborn is there, but the Green Goblin is still, he's still there in Norman's mind. So it's like he could take over at any time he wants to. So, like, he's still there. So he's still a threat to everybody. So then, he convinces, he's like, hey, we don't need fixing. He's like, just leave us alone. And he said these are gifts, and you shouldn't take that away from us, Peter. So then the villains, they break out. Electro breaks out of the apartment. He escapes. He even takes the arc reactor with him, because, like I said, because Electro didn't want to leave this universe. And the reason why he didn't want to leave the universe, the MCU universe, is because of the power. Because he really likes the power in this universe. Because he's like, the power is different. Because he feels he's stronger in the MCU. He's stronger in that universe. So, because of that, he didn't want to leave. So, he ended up taking the arc reactor with him, because the arc reactor is a piece of Stark tech that can power anything up. So, he uses that because that gives him more power. And even Doc, like I said, I remember it was actually Doc Ock who actually tried to stop him. He was like, what are you doing? He's like, what have you done? And then Jamie Foxx is like, I liked you better before. And then they get into a little fight, but then he pushes Doc Ock, like, out of the apartment. But Doc Ock, he escapes. Then Electro, he escapes, and Sandman escapes. The Lizard escapes. Not Doc Ock. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, and him, they're going at it in the apartment. Him and Peter, like, the two of them are going at it. Like, they're fighting each other. They're literally, this man, Willem Dafoe did a great job in this movie. Like, he did a really, 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 really great job. Because he's a legendary actor. He's a legend. So, of course, he would do a great job. But, like, in this movie, the Goblin, he was a real menace in this movie. I mean, he was a menace in the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, but like in this one, it's like he really knows how to bring all of his characters to life, and this is something that the Goblin would do, because you know in the comic books, Green Goblin is Spider-Man's arch nemesis, and like he knows how to break Spider-Man. That's exactly what Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin does in this movie. He breaks Spider-Man by killing Aunt May. So that's like this. So he's the one who kills Aunt May, because this thing Aunt May does die, but before she dies, she gives Peter the famous line, "With great power comes great responsibility," and she tells that to Tom Holland's Peter Parker. And in that moment, even though it's a very sad and emotional moment, because you know she dies like right there in his arms, but like the thing is, what they basically are telling us is that her purpose in the MCU is that she is his Uncle Ben, which is why it's so powerful. That's such a powerful moment. Like, that scene is very powerful because, like, you know, we usually see how, you know, Uncle Ben is the one who always dies at the beginning of each movie, but not with this one. Because, like I said, when they introduced Spider-Man to the MCU, we never saw Uncle Ben. Like, it was just, he was already Spider-Man and all that. Like, it just cut right to the chase. It got right to the point. And the thing is that, like, when she said, "You have a gift," and she said, like, "And you also have power," and then she said, "And with power," she said, "With great power comes great responsibility." That's what she said. She said, "Oh, there must also come great responsibility." That's the way how she said it. But even though that's the way how she said it, though. But still, she still said the line, though, which is, like, a powerful moment. Like, that's just a very powerful moment. And then after she says that, she dies. That, like, the Green Goblin succeeded in killing her, and the Green Goblin escapes. So Peter Parker, because you know Damage Control shows up because J. Jonah Jameson called them. They start shooting at Peter, but he actually escapes. Happy sees Peter. He actually shows up to his, you know, that's his apartment. So like, he shows up. He sees May is dead. He sees Peter right there holding her in his arms, and he's like, "Peter, run!" And then he escapes and just goes somewhere else. And Ned and MJ, they don't know where he is. It's like nobody knows where he is at the moment. But that's another thing. This is where things really pick up right here. I mean, even though things have already picked up at this point, but like, this is where it really, really goes where the movie gets absolutely insane. So it cuts straight to Ned and MJ. They're at Ned's grandmother's house, and they saw what happened on the news, that, you know, Aunt May's dead, and that the whole apartment, you know, the whole apartment complex was just literally just nothing but rubble, basically. Like, most of it was rubble, but like, it's crazy. But like, they're like, wow, like, they're like, you know what, we're gonna this is what MJ actually yeah, it was MJ who said it. She said, "I'm gonna press the button." And you know, when you press the button, that sends all the villains back to their universes, and when you do that, they basically die once they get back to the universes. But the thing is, what's so interesting about this is that after the fight with Doctor Strange, Peter, when he stole Doctor Strange's ring that allows him to open up the portals, he gives that ring to Ned. And what happens in this moment is that, like, when Ned and MJ, they're talking to each other, they're like, when Ned is like, "Hey, he said don't push the button," but then she's like, "I know what he said, but I had to push it." She said, "I'm gonna do it." But then Ned is like, he just starts waving his hand in there. He's like, "I wish we could see Peter." And then a portal starts to open up, but then it closes for a quick second. Like, it opened up for a second, then it's closed. And then MJ's like, "Hey, do that again." She's like, "Do that again, Ned." And he does it again. He actually opens a portal. And there's actually somebody standing in the dark. Like, you can see them, like, from a distance. There's somebody on the other side of that portal. And, you know, he's like, they're both like, they're like, Ned and MJ, they're like, "Is that him? Is that Peter?" And then they both say, "Peter, Peter, Peter." And then literally Spider-Man comes running up. He jumps through the portal. But the only thing is, it's not Tom Holland Spider-Man. It's Andrew Garfield. who jumps through the portal. Andrew Garfield is in this movie. It's Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and he even takes off his mask. And they're like, wait, who are you? And then he says, I'm Peter Parker, and I'm Spider-Man in my world, because he knows that he's not in his universe. So that's how he already knows. He's like, wait a minute. He's like, wait a minute. I know this isn't my world, because he said that he said yesterday I was just here. And then I remember he was also going through like the scientific theories that he made about, you know, the dimensions and all that. And then MJ and Ned, they both told him, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about the whole universal thing. And then he's like, yes, I knew it, because he made good scientific theories. But it doesn't just end there. So after Andrew shows up, Ned and MJ, they're talking, and then MJ's like, okay, so I guess we gotta keep, she said, I guess we are gonna have to keep trying to open up more portals until we find our Peter. Well, she said to the real Peter Parker. And it was actually funny, that whole scene where, like, literally throwing bread at Andrew Garfield. She's like crawling around the wall. She's like, you got the tingle thing? He's like, yeah, I got the tingle thing. Like, that whole scene was funny. And then he crawled up on the ceiling and all that. That was hilarious. But it doesn't just end there. Like I said, it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there at all. So what actually happens next is that Ned ends up opening another portal in order to find Peter Parker. And he opens up another portal, and the person that steps out of that portal is literally it's absolutely insane. It's Tobey Maguire who steps through that portal. And it's nuts. Like, we didn't, like I said, literally my jaw dropped. I was like, oh my god, like, I'm like, this is really happening. Like, I literally was going nuts. Even with the whole Andrew thing, it's like, once Ned opened up that first portal, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh my god. I was like, that's not Tom Holland Spider-Man. Because you could tell that it's not him. Because, like, he's not that tall. And it's like the way how Andrew Garfield moves, like his movement, it's like, that's not how Tom Holland moves. And then, like, when he jumped over that portal, I literally just lost it. I was like, yo, Andrew Garfield is in this movie. But then I lost it even more when Tobey Maguire stepped through that portal. When Tobey Maguire stepped through that portal, bro, I was like, I literally was like, oh my god, I'm going to pass out. Because, like, it's Tobey Maguire. I mean, come on. It's Tobey Maguire, the legend. The one who's back, dude, is Tobey Maguire. And just to see him again is just, it's like, I literally was speechless. And I was like, I didn't know what to really say. It was like, it was nuts. And that was nothing too. Before the movie even came out, we had already heard rumors that they were going to be in the movie. But just to see them actually show up is like, it's mind-boggling is what it is. It's just, it's nuts. But then, anyways, after Tobey shows up, he's like, hi, I've actually been looking for your friend. And he's, of course, talking about Tom Holland Spider-Man. And then he said, I just sense that he needs my help. And then Andrew joins in. He's like, our help. And MJ's like, yeah, he really does. Because now we're really all he has left now. Because they know that Aunt May had died. And it's like, Ned and MJ, the only people that Tom Holland Spider-Man has in his life. And Andrew and Tobey, they're like, okay, think of a place where you can find him. And they actually end up finding Tom Holland Spider-Man. And he's on the rooftop of their high school. And then Ned and MJ show up, they give him a hug. It's a very emotional scene. But then then MJ says, Peter, there's some people here to see you. And literally, you literally see Tobey and Andrew, they literally just jump down, like, from the very top of the school. It's just, you know, it's a cool moment. And then the three of them, Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire, they're all just going around. They're just like, they're connecting with each other because they know what it's like to lose somebody, like, doing this. Like, when you're Spider-Man, there will always be a cost, especially for the people who are around you and, like, the ones who are close to you. And that's basically what they're discussing. And and Toby's like, I'm so sorry about May. And then Andrew, he's like, yeah, I'm really sorry. And then Tom Holland's like, but you guys have to go back to your world. He's like, I'm sorry that I dragged you all into this and all that. But then, they go into it, and then Toby's like, I know what it's like because I lost my Uncle Ben. And then Andrew was like, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, he's like, I lost Gwen and she was my MJ. So, like, they're basically connecting with each other because they all know what it's like to lose the people around them that they really care about. And at one point, Tom Holland, when he's in this whole conversation with them, at one point he's like, before May died, she told me that with great power, and then Tobey Maguire finished it off. He said, comes great responsibility. And then Tom Holland, he's like, how do you know that? And then Andrew Garfield was like, because Uncle Ben said it. Because remember, Andrew Garfield's Uncle Ben also said that to him. He said those very words to him. And then, Andrew, he's like, yeah, because he's like, because Uncle Ben said it. And then Toby's like, the day he died. So then that's when they all connect with each other. And then they go into the lab of the high school, and they're starting to work on cures together. Like I said, because they're all really smart. They're all scientists. So, like, they know exactly what to do. And, they make cures to everybody and all that. And then they actually do the Spider-Man meme. The one meme when they're actually, like, pointing at each other? And, like, that's basically the meme that they do in this movie. They do it twice, actually. Especially, like, in the final battle, when they're getting ready to fight the villains. They're like, wait, I thought you were Peter 1. No, I thought you were Peter 2. I thought you were Peter 3. Like, they did it twice in the movie. And it was really cool. And then at one point they actually discuss about their webbing. They actually have a whole conversation about their webbing and all that. So Ned, he gives Tom Holland Spider-Man, the web fluid that he needs for his web shooters. And then Toby's like, wait, what? He's like, what's that for? He's like, oh, these are for my web shooters in order for me to, like, swing around and all that. And then Toby just shoots a web out of his hand. They were like, everybody's just, like, freaked out. They're like, whoa. Like, they're all just, like, flabbergasted because, like, they don't know because they never seen that before. And, like, Toby's like, he's like, you can't do that, huh? And then Andrew was like, no, I can't do that either. Because, like, Andrew, he also uses web shooters as well. And, yeah, so it's a pretty cool, I love the chemistry between the three of them. It's absolutely amazing. It's a very beautiful moment. Like, a whole bunch of beautiful moments in this movie, especially when the three of them were together. And then another cool thing is I like the fact how during the final battle, when they're about to fight the villains, they all jump off of the Statue of Liberty together. Like, off the platform of the Statue of Liberty, they all jump off together. And then they start web swinging. Like, all three of them start swinging together. And it's just an amazing moment. And then I even like I really love the order that they landed in, too. Because Tobey Maguire was the first one that landed. Then it was Andrew. Then it was Tom Holland in the middle when they're about to fight the villains. And it's a really cool moment. So they end up, fighting the villains. They end up curing all of them. Doctor Strange actually shows up. And he tells Peter, he's like, I'm glad that your plan worked, that you're actually able to cure all of them. But he says this has to end. They have to go back. And that's exactly what they're about to do. And before that happens, it's a really cool moment, is that they actually did a Miles Morales reference in the movie, because after they cured Jamie Foxx's Electro, Andrew is talking, because, Andrew Garfield and Jamie Foxx, they're from the same universe. And they're both talking to each other to kind of, like, make up for lost times and all that. And, he finally sees Andrew Garfield, like, without the mask. And it's actually... And it's actually a really cool moment, because it's also it's really funny too. Andrew Garfield was hilarious in this movie, man. He was hilarious. Like, they all were. Especially, like, when Tom Holland was like, he's like, I don't want to brag, but I was in the Avengers. And then Tobey Maguire's like, that's great. He's like, the Avengers, that's great. And then he's like, what is that? Like, that scene was hilarious. But what's funny about this is that they make a Miles Morales reference where Jamie Foxx is like, no, he's like, no, man, like, you help a lot of people out. And he says, you help a lot of poor people. He said, you got that suit. But he said, I was just hoping that you'd be black. And then Andrew Garfield's like, oh, I'm sorry. That scene was hilarious. But then Jamie Foxx says this. He says, there's got to be black Spider-Man out there somewhere. And there is. And that's Miles Morales. And Tom Holland is getting another MCU trilogy. So maybe in the next trilogy, they might introduce Miles Morales into the MCU. Who knows? But until then, we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, it's a really cool moment. And then even Doc Ock and Tobey Maguire, because you know they're from the same universe, they even make up for lost times. Doc Ock is like, he's like, Peter, you're all grown up. He's like, how are you? And you know, Peter says, I'm trying to do better, and that's a direct reference to Spider-Man 2, because he said that to Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2. And it's a beautiful moment to see the two of them just make up for lost times. But then another thing is that what happens is that when they're about to like fix everything, Green Goblin shows up and he puts a pumpkin bomb inside of the box that sends everybody back to the universes. He blows it up and the cash is like, the whole spell literally just gets out of control and it just rips a hole like in the sky. Like there's a bunch of tears and everything and cracks happening in the sky because of that. And what happens is that, like, you know, Green Goblin, you know, he blew everything up with this pumpkin bomb, and like MJ and Ned is just dangling off the Statue of Liberty, and MJ just falls right off the Statue of Liberty, and Tom Holland's Peter tries to catch her, but then Green Goblin actually captures Tom Holland in the process. But what happens next is that Andrew Garfield, you know, actually saves MJ, because we saw how in Amazing Spider-Man 2, we saw how he failed to save Gwen Stacy, but he actually redeemed himself in this scene by saving MJ, because he's like, hey, I couldn't save Gwen, but I can still save you. And he actually does it. He saves MJ. And you know, he asks MJ, he's like, are you okay? And then she says, yeah. And then she asked him, is he okay? Because he starts tearing up. And she's like, are you okay? And then he said, yeah. And I just like the fact how they gave Andrew Garfield, they gave him a lot of closure in this movie, which I really appreciate. You know, like, I really appreciate how they gave him more closure in this film. And it works. It really works. But then, you know, it cuts to Willem Dafoe and Tom Holland. They both fall because after Tom Holland, you know, blows up like his Green Goblin's glider or whatever, that causes him to fall off the glider or whatever. But they after that, after everybody else is okay, Willem Dafoe and Tom Holland, they literally face off in basically into the like a death battle, basically a fight to the death. Because as you guys, like I said, this is after he killed Aunt May. This is after Green Goblin killed Aunt May. So you know that's the slice. So you know that's why Tom Holland is very pissed off in this scene, because it's like he killed his Aunt May, and that's why Peter Parker in the scene is very mad, and he wants. And like I said, he literally told Toby and Andrew, he said he wants to kill the Green Goblin, and that's what Tom Holland's Peter tries to do. He tries to kill the Green Goblin because they literally beat the crap out of each other. Literally just like, man, like it's crazy. But then, you know, Tom Holland's Peter, he actually gets the upper hand, and he actually starts getting, you know, the upper hand and beats up Green Goblin. And then he takes the Green Goblin's glider, because you know how the glider has like the blades that come out of it. So what happens is that Tom Holland picks up the glider and he tries to slam it down on the Green Goblin, so that way he can stab the Green Goblin with the glider. But then Toby actually jumps in front of Green Goblin, and he actually catches Tom Holland from, you know, he actually catches the glider before it hits Green Goblin. and he's like holding the glider, and Tom Holland's still trying to get past him, but Toby is just looking at him, and even though he doesn't say anything in that scene, like it's just Toby just staring at Tom Holland in that moment, because, and that's the thing, he doesn't really have to say anything. He's basically speaking with his mind. He's basically saying, like, don't do this. This isn't you. Like, even if you kill him, it won't bring her back. Like, that's basically what he was doing in that scene. That's basically what he was saying. So he convinces Tom Holland to put the glider down. They put the glider down, and this is where, I'm not gonna lie, I got mad for a second here, because I thought they were about to do something horrible. But after they put the glider down, you know, Tobey Maguire is right in front of Green Goblin. And Green Goblin literally literally stabs Tobey Maguire in the back. And then after that, Tom Holland, he takes the cure and he stabs Green Goblin in the neck with the cure. And he injects the cure into his body, and Norman Osborn is back to normal again. So no more Darker Half. And he's no longer the Green Goblin. Like, he's just Norman Osborn again, because now they cured Norman Osborn. So yeah, so now, you know, Tom Holland takes the cure and he cures the Green Goblin, and now the Green Goblin is just Norman Osborn now. But then, you know, they cut right back to Tobey. Tobey Maguire, he's perfectly fine. He even says it himself. He's like, I'm fine. He was basically like this. This is literally what he said word for word. He's like, yeah, I'm good. I've been stabbed before. And then Andrew's like, oh, good. So Tobey Maguire, he lives in this movie. He survives. Tobey Maguire's fine. He survives in this movie. And I'm so glad that they kept Tobey Maguire alive, because it's just good to see Tobey Maguire just still being Spider-Man, you know? It's a good feeling, you know, especially after all these years. But yeah, Tobey Maguire, he survives, he lives, and now Doctor Strange, he can't control everything that's happening around him, because there are other people who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man that are coming through the cracks, or the portal, I should say, from other universes. Like, they're starting to come through, but he can't stop them. So Peter is like, he's like, can't we just do the spell again? And then Doctor Strange is like, no, that won't work. And then Peter was like, why? He's like, just cast a new spell. He said, except make everybody forget that Peter Parker. Like, but no, I'm sorry. What did he said? Okay, this is what he said. I remember he said this. He said, okay, cast a new spell. And then he said, instead of people forgetting that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, make everyone forget about Peter Parker. And that's where it really takes a turn, because people will still remember Spider-Man, but they won't remember Peter Parker. Like, it won't, like, as if he never existed, basically. And in that moment, it's crazy, because literally everyone that he loves will forget about him. And another thing is that, you know, before he casts a new spell, you know, Doctor Strange, like, he's like, okay, before I cast a spell, he says, best to say your final goodbyes. And he does that. And then Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, he's like, thank you, sir. And then Doctor Strange is like, he's like, call me Steven. And, you know, Peter, he says, I'll see you around. So that was the last time they talked to each other, him and Doctor Strange. But then before everybody goes back to their own universes, Tom Holland actually thanks Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and he actually gives them a hug, and they basically, the three Spider-Man actually have a group hug, and it's a very, very beautiful moment. It gives you a really good feeling, you know. I mean, it's a sad but fulfilling ending, you know. Like, it's for the best. And then, you know, he gives, you know, Ned and MJ a hug, and then he gives MJ one more kiss, and then he makes a promise to them. He's like, don't worry guys, like I'll come find you. He's like, I'll come find you guys, and then we like I said, we can all still be together and all that. Like we can still hang out and be a team again. So like that's basically what he tells them, you know, before he swings away. And you know, he gives MJ their the last kiss, and then he swings away, and then Doctor Strange casts a new spell, and that's it. Everyone, now the whole world doesn't know who Peter Parker is, but they still know Spider-Man, but they don't know who Peter Parker is. They have no memory of him. It's like they literally forgot about him, like as if he never existed or anything like that. So after that, he goes to Aunt May's grave and pays his respects. Happy's even there, and of course, Happy doesn't even know who Peter Parker is anymore because of the spell. And they're having a whole conversation, him and Happy, and all that. Oh, that's what I meant to say. Oh, right. Look, let me rewind. Okay, so before that even happens, Peter Parker actually goes to MJ's job, to the place that she works at, and it was the coffee donut shop place, and he goes there, and he's like, "Hi, my name is Peter Parker. I would like a cup of coffee." Because he actually finds out that Ned and MJ actually got into MIT, and they're happy and all that. And even when he saw like the bandage that was on her head, like from the final battle, that's in that moment. That's when he realized he's like the two of them are just better off without me, because they got into college and they're gonna have a happy life. And Peter just says thank you for the coffee, and then he leaves, and like he doesn't tell MJ or Ned who he is. And that's how it ends for them, I guess. Well, I shouldn't say I guess, but that is how it ends for them. But after that, like I say, he goes to Aunt May's grave, pays respects, he has a conversation with Happy, and then Happy's like, how did you know her? And then Peter's like, through Spider-Man, and then Happy's like, yeah, I knew her through Spider-Man too. So then, he says, alright, you take care of yourself. And then, Happy's like, thanks. And then Peter actually ends up getting his own apartment. And like I said, because, everybody went back to the universes. Like, all the villains went back to the universes. And Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, they went back to their own universes as well. But, just everything just goes back to normal, except nobody knows who Peter is. So it is like a happy ending, but it's also a sad ending as well. But he gets his own apartment, and he's on his own now, because he doesn't have Aunt May there for him she's not there for him anymore. It's just nobody knows who he is. It's over. Like that's it. Like he's basically a ghost, basically. But he gets his own place, and he actually creates a new suit. He makes a new suit, and it's actually a red and blue suit. And it's probably going to be the most comic accurate Spider-Man suit we're ever going to get in live action form. Because this suit, the suit that he makes at the end, is very comic accurate. It's got like the bright red and blue colors and everything. Like it looks great. And then he does his final swing, and he's swinging out to the city because there's crime afoot and all that. And he's just swinging in New York in his new suit, and it's actually Christmas time because it's actually snowing at the end of the movie when he's swinging. And that's the end of the movie. He just swings away, and he's just web swinging. Then it just cuts to black, and that's the end of the movie. And then there's actually two post-credit scenes. Well, technically one post-credit scene. So at the end of the Venom Let There Be Carnage, we saw how in that movie it had its own post-credit scene. And in that post-creded scene, it showed us how Tom Hardy's Venom actually got transported to the MCU. Because, Tom Holland's Peter Parker was on the TV and all that. At the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage. But in this movie, after all of that happened with the whole, like, after everything goes back to normal, and like now that the whole world forgets who Peter Parker is, I mean, like I said, they still know who Spider-Man is, but they don't know who Peter Parker is. He's actually, Tom Hardy's Venom is actually in a bar and in Mexico, and he's asking this bartender a whole bunch of questions. So there was like a group of heroes, and then he was like, there was like a billionaire in a tin suit who will fly around. Now he's dead, and then the bartender's like, yeah, and then he was like, so people disappeared for 5 years, and then they came back for 5 years later, and then the bartender was like, yeah, so, because, you know, that's not his universe, and he's trying to figure everything out because he's very confused. But what happens is that because of the new spell that Doctor Strange had casted, Tom Hardy ends up going back to his own universe, but he actually leaves something behind, and it's actually a piece of the symbiote. So now the symbiote is in the MCU. It's only like a little piece of the symbiote. All it just has to do is just bond to a host in order to become like Venom or like anything like that. But like I said, Tom Holland might actually end up getting the black suit in the MCU. I mean, because the symbiote is in the MCU now, so maybe in the future Tom Holland Spider-Man might end up getting the black suit in the MCU. Who knows? But like I said, all we know is that the symbiote is in the MCU. And then what happens is that in the other post-credit scene, well, not scene, but it's actually a trailer, the second post-credit scene, or whatever you want to call it, but like, it's actually a trailer, and it's actually a trailer for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which comes out in 2022. And that's it, man. Like, that's basically how the movie ends. And yeah, very crazy movie. Like, it's just very insane. And like I said in the other review I did, I literally said that this is like the best Spider-Man movie I've ever seen. And the thing is that I saw this movie on December 16th, like the day before the movie actually came out worldwide. So I saw it on its premiere night, and I was just blown away by the time I got out of that movie theater. Because me and my brother, we were the two of us went to go see the movie. And like, it's just, it's a sad but like fulfilling ending, and I think they ended it on a really good note. And we already know that Tom Holland is getting another trilogy in the MCU, so yeah, and maybe they might bring Miles in the next trilogy. Who knows? Because they did make a reference in like early in the movie, like at the end of the movie, they did do a reference and all that. So who knows? Maybe he might be in the next trilogy, because they gotta introduce him to the MCU somehow. But I just love the fact, like, everybody in this movie did a phenomenal job, especially Tom Holland. Like, his acting in this movie was phenomenal. And like, by the time that at the end of this movie, I was like, he really is Spider-Man. Because it's like, although like in other movies, like, we already knew that he was Spider-Man, but at the end of this movie, you're really gonna just say to yourself, like he is Spider-Man, because like he's gone through it all, and that's like, he's actually suffered, and you know, he's faced the consequences of being a superhero. He's made sacrifices, like, and that's what a hero does. So he truly is Spider-Man. And yeah, it's a great movie. Like, I absolutely loved it. Like, it was phenomenal. Like I said, Spider-Man 2 used to be my number, like, from 2004, the Tobey Maguire movie. That used to be number 1 at the top of my list, but now I think that's number 2, and Spider-Man No Way Home is now number 1. Because it's like, they did a lot of fan service in this movie, and it paid off. It just, they did the impossible, man. But yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home, have you all seen it? Let me know what you guys think about the movie. Like, did it live up to your expectations? Did it live up to the hype? Like, leave it down in the comment section below, and always, as always, leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.